There are places on Terra where sound is swallowed before it can echo, where stone has not been moved in 10,000 years, because no one living remembers how. Beneath the golden throne, beneath the prayers, beneath the endless hum of machinery that keeps the Emperor's body sustained, there are depths the Imperium does not describe, not because they are empty, but because they are too full, too old, too intertwined with the moment humanity decided survival was worth any cost. The throne is presented as an altar, a weapon, a life support system for a god emperor who cannot die. What it truly rests upon is something far more unsettling. A foundation built from secrets layered so deeply that even the Adeptus Custodes speak of them only in half-remembered odes. To ask what lies beneath the golden throne is not to seek forbidden knowledge. It is to ask what the Imperium is actually standing on, and how long it can remain upright before the weight below shifts. If you value stories that explore the hidden structures holding the Imperium together, consider supporting the channel by liking this video, share it with others who walk the grim darkness of Warhammer 40K, and subscribing so you don't miss what remains buried just out of sight. Terra was never meant to carry this much mass. Long before the Imperium crowned the heart of humanity, before the Imperial Palace swallowed continents and the Golden Throne became the axis around which the galaxy turned, the planet already strained under the weight of its own history. Now that strain has been multiplied 1,000-fold. Beneath the palace spires and sanctified halls, the crust groans constantly, a sound too deep for most human ears to register, but felt by those who work close enough to the foundations. It is a pressure that never stops, a reminder that even worlds have limits. Those limits are managed by people who are never named. Far below the throne room sanctum, where the Emperor's silent form radiates myth and certainty, maintenance levels stretch outward like the roots of a dead god. These are not places of ceremony. They are places of heat and vibration, where the air tastes of metal dust and machine oil no matter how often it is filtered. Servitors move along prescribed paths, their augmetic limbs calibrated for repetition rather than speed, carrying replacement components whose original purpose has often been lost to time. Adeptus Mechanicus adepts oversee them with data slates scarred by centuries of revisions, each annotation layered atop another in a language that grows more ritualistic the deeper one descends. The Golden Throne is not a single machine. It is an ecosystem of systems, some active, some dormant, some cycling so slowly that a human lifespan passes before their status changes. Power conduits thicker than city towers run to the bedrock, pulsing with energies that warp local gravity by measurable degrees. Cooling channels carry fluids whose composition is classified even for most of the priests of Mars, because knowing what something is often leads to asking why it is needed. On Terra, why is a dangerous word. Those assigned to these depths are chosen for reliability, not curiosity. They learn quickly that the throne does not tolerate improvisation. Every procedure is followed exactly, even when its original logic no longer makes sense. A valve is turned because the valve has always been turned. A chamber is sealed because it was sealed long before anyone remembers opening it. Deviations are logged as potential catastrophes, because no one truly understands which subsystem failure might cascade upward and become visible to the sanctum above. The Adeptus Custodes are present even here. Not numerous, not intrusive, but unmistakable. A single custodian standing watch in a maintenance vault alters the behavior of everyone within sight. Voices lower. Movements become precise. The custodian guard does not explain what it protects at this depth, and it does not need to. Its presence alone is instruction enough. Some areas are not to be questioned. Some systems are not to be fully mapped. Some knowledge is considered heavier than ignorance. The labor never stops. Shifts overlap not because efficiency demands it, but because there can never be a moment when no one is listening to the throne's pulse. Vibrations are measured constantly, their frequencies compared against baselines that date back to the earliest days of the Imperium. When deviations occur, even minor ones, they are treated with the same gravity as battlefield emergencies. Components are replaced, rites performed, litanies spoken to appease machine spirits that no longer resemble anything comprehensible. The goal is not improvement. Improvement implies change. The goal is stasis. Those who work closest to the throne's foundations develop a particular kind of fatigue. It is not physical exhaustion, though that is constant. It is a fatigue of maintaining something whose failure would rewrite reality. Every action carries weight far beyond its scale. Tightening a seal incorrectly might doom a sector. Misreading a fluctuation could blind navigators across the void, and the Astronomican's support systems destabilize, even briefly. These possibilities are never spoken aloud, but they hang in the air like a permanent pressure differential. At times, the throne responds. Not overtly, not in ways that doctrine would acknowledge. A vibration settles after a ritual is completed precisely. A harmonic stabilizes when an ancient chant is recited in full, even if the word's meaning has been lost. These correlations are logged, categorized, and never described as causation. To suggest the throne reacts would be to imply awareness, and awareness invites questions no one is authorized to ask. For those stationed here long enough, the golden throne stops feeling like a structure and begins to feel like a presence. Not conscious, not deliberate, but insistent, like a mountain that shifts imperceptibly beneath your feet, reminding you that it is not passive simply because it is slow. You learn to respect that presence, not through faith, but through survival. Above, pilgrims kneel and pray. Above, the Emperor is spoken of as eternal, unchanging, divine. Below, the throne demands constant attention, constant sacrifice of labor, bodies, and time. These two truths coexist without touching, separated by kilometers of stone and dogma. And beneath even this, beneath the known maintenance levels and recorded schematics, there are depths no one assigned here is clear to enter. Shafts sealed with mechanisms older than the Imperium itself. Power draws that register on no official grid. Chambers whose existence is acknowledged only by the fact that their doors are guarded. The throne is heavy, not just in mass, but in consequence. And everything beneath it exists to keep that weight from shifting, because no one truly knows what would happen if it did. The deeper you go, the more Terra stops feeling like a planet and starts feeling like a machine built around a single, impossible purpose. The corridors narrow until they are scarcely wide enough for two adept to pass without turning sideways. The stone gives way to layered alloys and ancient composite materials that do not match any standard Mechanicus catalog, as if the foundations were built in an era when classification was unnecessary, because understanding was assumed. Here, the air is warmer, but not in the way heat rises. It feels generated, radiating outward from conduits and chambers that throb with power too old to be elegant. Every few hundred meters, there are shrines, not grand ones, not the kind pilgrims would recognize. Small alcoves set into bulkheads where cog-toothed icons hang beside tarnished aquili, where incense burns in tiny cups, where oil is dabbed onto metal panels with careful, practiced reverence. The adepts insist these rites are maintenance. The custodian guard tolerates them because they work. The line between prayer and procedure disappears completely at this depth, and the people here no longer try to separate them. Servitors fail more often down here. Their bodies are not suited to the pressure, the vibration, the constant electromagnetic interference. Some seize mid-task, augmetic limbs locking as if the nervous system has been interrupted by a signal no flesh can interpret. Others simply stop, their bio-core shutting down as if exhausted, even though exhaustion is supposed to be an obsolete concept for something stripped of choice. When they collapse, they are dragged aside and replaced without comment. Their remains are gathered later, recycled, repurposed, fed back into systems that do not care when material came from so long as it functions. The adepts learn to interpret the throne's moods through sound. A slight change in pitch from a distant conduit. A vibration pattern that feels wrong beneath the soles of boots. A tremor that passes like a breath. Too slow to be seismic. Too regular to be random. These sensations become a language, half technical, half instinct. A veteran adept can stop mid-corridor, place a hand against the metal, and know that a stabilizer array 3 levels below is slipping out of tolerance. They will not explain how they know. They often cannot. They only act because acting is safer than naming. The Golden Throne's upkeep is a constant negotiation with failure. Systems installed centuries apart must interface seamlessly despite originating from different epochs, different philosophies, different levels of understanding. Entire sections have been retrofitted so many times that they resemble archaeological sites more than machinery, layers of cables and conduits woven atop one another like scar tissue. When something breaks, replacement is rarely straightforward. Parts are unique, irreplaceable, and often incomprehensible. In those cases, the Adeptus Mechanicus does not repair. It compensates. It routes around. It builds support upon support until the original weakness is entombed beneath newer, more desperate solutions. Somewhere in the depths, a repair team reaches a junction marked only by an unadorned seal and a designation that does not appear on the active schematics. The data slate they carry displays the instructions anyway, because the instructions have always existed, copied from older slates, transcribed into newer tongues, passed down with the same unquestioned obedience as prayer. The team pauses here, not out of fear but out of respect. A custodian stands nearby, unmoving, helm angled just enough to make it clear that what lies beyond is not for them. The junction's door is not opened. The repairs performed from outside it, through access ports that allow contact with internal systems, without granting entry. Tools are inserted carefully. Readings are taken. Adjustments made in increments, so small they feel like superstition. The adepts speak litanies under their breath, because the litanies steady their hands. When the readings stabilize, the ports are sealed again. The door remains untouched. No one asks what is behind it. The question itself feels like a fault condition. Even those who have served here for decades speak of the sealed depths only indirectly. They reference them the way one references pressure in the sky before a storm, something you can feel without ever seeing its source. They warn newcomers not to wander, not to trust unofficial maps, not to follow maintenance routes that do not appear in the shift logs. Terra's underlevels are full of old corridors that lead to dead ends. They are also full of corridors that do not. Occasionally, an alarm triggers that does not match any standard pattern. A siren tone too low to be heard properly, felt instead as nausea and vertigo. Emergency lumen strips flash in sequences that carry no obvious meaning. When this happens, the adepts freeze, not because they do not know what to do, but because the correct response is to wait. Protocol dictates that those alarms are not theirs to answer. They belong to the custodian guard. The adepts retreat to designated safe alcoves, heads bowed, hands still, as if movement itself might offend something watching. Then the custodians move. You do not hear them approach. You simply look up and realize they are already there, golden armor catching dim light, like a blade catching a heartbeat of sun. They pass without speaking. They do not acknowledge the adepts. They do not need to. Their silence carries the weight of unspoken authority, and the adepts feel the most unsettling truth of all. Their failures down here Mechanicus is not allowed to fix, and threats down here the Imperium does not explain. When the alarm clears, work resumes. No reports are filed beyond mandatory acknowledgments. No discussions are held. Whatever happened is absorbed into routine the way everything else is absorbed, sealed behind procedure and forgotten by design. By the time an adept finishes a shift near the throne's deepest foundations, the surface of Terra feels like a myth. Sunlight, open air, crowds of pilgrims, those things belong to another world. Down here, reality is heat, vibration, metal, and the constant sense of being close to something that holds the Imperium together by sheer, grinding insistence. And beneath even these levels, beneath doors that are never open and alarms that are never explained, the sealed depths wait in complete silence, unchanged by maintenance or prayer. Whatever lies there does not need attention. It only needs to remain buried. People who serve near the Golden Throne for long enough begin to notice things they cannot report. Not malfunctions, not measurable deviations. Things that exist in the margins of attention, too inconsistent to log and too persistent to ignore. The Adeptus Mechanicus has no formal designation for these experiences, but everyone down here knows about them. They are discussed obliquely, through warnings disguised as advice and anecdotes framed as exhaustion. It often begins with sound, not noise in the conventional sense, not alarms or mechanical failure, but something closer to resonance. A harmonic that does not register on auspex arrays, yet vibrates faintly through bone and augmetic alike. It is most noticeable during periods of relative stability, when all systems are within tolerance and the throne's immense processes have settled into their grinding equilibrium. In those moments, When there should be nothing to hear but the background roar of power, a different rhythm emerges. Slow, deliberate, almost patient. Some adepts describe it as chanting, though that word is quickly corrected by supervisors who remind them that anthropomorphizing machinery is a cognitive hazard. Others call it feedback, a harmless artifact of overlapping systems interacting across incompatible epochs of technology. Both explanations are accepted because both are safer than admitting the alternative, that the sound seems to respond to proximity, growing clearer the longer one remains in certain zones beneath the throne. Sleep becomes unreliable for those assigned to these levels. Dreams arrive heavy and vivid, crowded with images that feel borrowed rather than imagined. Endless corridors folding into one another, machinery descending without visible support, light filtering down from somewhere impossibly far above, carrying no warmth. The Emperor appears sometimes, but never clearly, not enthroned, not crowned, only as a presence implied by pressure, like a storm sensed through changes in air rather than sight. These dreams are never shared openly. They are confessed only during mandatory psychological evaluations, where they are noted as stress responses and quietly dismissed. The throne's machinery has a way of shaping thought through repetition. The same procedures performed at the same intervals, the same routes walked shift after shift, the same litanies murmured at identical junctions. Over time, this rhythm imprints itself on the mind. Adepts find themselves thinking in cycles, anticipating steps before they occur, responding to fluctuations before instruments confirm them. This heightened awareness is praised as professional excellence. No one questions why it feels less like learning and more like acclimation. There are moments when the throne feels aware of attention. An adept pauses too long at a diagnostic panel, distracted by a reading that refuses to stabilize. The vibration beneath their boots deepens slightly, enough to be felt but not enough to trigger alarms. The reading resolves immediately afterward. Another time, a servitor stalls at a junction where no obstacle is present. The machine's optics swivel slowly, tracking nothing visible, until a custodian appears at the end of the corridor. Only then does the servitor resume movement, systems reporting no fault. These incidents are logged as coincidences. Patterns require context, and context invites speculation. Faith complicates matters further. Those raised within the ecclesiarchy's strictures are taught that proximity to the emperor's presence carries spiritual consequences. Awe, dread, illumination, corruption if the soul is unworthy. These teachings clash uneasily with Mechanicus doctrine, which frames the throne as an artifact sustained through correct operation rather than reverence. Down here, the two beliefs bleed into one another. A malfunction corrected after a prayer is credited procedure. A stabilization following a litany is attributed to coincidence. No one can say where faith ends and function begins, and so both are maintained simultaneously. The custodian guard notices changes before anyone else, not because they experience the same symptoms, but because they watch the people who do. An adept lingers too long in a maintenance shaft, reluctant to leave despite no remaining tasks. Another develops an aversion to certain corridors, rerouting unconsciously even when it adds hours to a shift. These behaviors are noted quietly. Reassignments follow. The adepts are moved upward, away from the deepest levels, often without explanation. They leave believing they have failed in some undefined way, unaware that the reassignment may have saved them. Those who remain begin to feel the throne less as a structure and more as a presence embedded in their routine. Not active, not communicative. Simply there, exerting influence through scale and constancy. Like gravity, it does not need to announce itself to be felt. You stop noticing its pull only because it never stops acting upon you. Whispers circulate, never traced to a single source. That some adepts have heard voices in machinery, not during failures, but during moments of perfect stability. That the words are not commands, not warnings, but fragment of thought, incomplete and disjointed, as if something is remembering out loud. These stories are always followed by a reminder that stress manifests unpredictably, that Terra's depths are hostile to the human psyche. The reminders are correct. They are also insufficient. The most unsettling thing is not the whispers themselves. It is that the throne seems to notice when they stop. In the deepest maintenance levels, silence is never truly silent. It has texture, pressure, and a faint vibration that settles into the teeth over time. New adepts fight at first, trying to drown it with measured breathing, with muttered litanies, with the small noises that reassure the mind it is still alone inside itself. Veteran adepts do not fight it. They listen, not because they believe the throne is speaking, but because ignoring anything down here feels irresponsible in a way that borders on sacrilege. There are areas where the sensation intensifies, junctions where multiple subsystems converge, and the air itself seems to carry a different density. In these places, thought becomes harder to hold in a straight line. The mind drifts not toward madness exactly, but toward association. A sound becomes a memory. A vibration becomes an emotion. A distant harmonic becomes a word that almost forms, then slips away before meaning can anchor it. You leave these junctions feeling as though you have forgotten something important, and the feeling follows you like a shadow. The Mechanicus has procedures for cognitive drift. It has prayer codes that double as diagnostic resets, mantras designed to stabilize attention by forcing the mind into prescribed patterns. These are recited often down here, not only because they are required, but because they work. An adept who feels her thoughts fraying can recite the litany of true circuitry and feel the world sharpen again. Edges returning to corridors and panels, numbers resuming their expected obedience. The relief is immediate, which is what makes it unsettling. Relief implies you were drifting somewhere you should not have been. Some adepts begin to develop small, private habits that are never formally sanctioned. A particular sequence of taps against a bulkhead before entering a corridor that feels wrong. A whispered phrase spoken only when the vibration deepens unexpectedly. A refusal to look directly at certain sealed doors, not because they believe something is watching from behind them, but because the act of looking produces a sensation like pressure behind the eyes. These habits are not called superstition. They are called caution. Down here, the difference is mostly semantic. The most persistent accounts, always shared in fragments, always framed as exhaustion, describe moments when the machinery seems to anticipate attention. An adept reaches toward a control panel and finds it already warm, as if recently touched, though no one else is present. A diagnostic screen flickers and resolves into a stable readout seconds before the auspex should have updated. An emergency lumen strip activates briefly in a corridor with no recorded fault, illuminating a path that the adept instinctively follows, only to arrive at a subsystem on the verge of failure that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. These incidents are filed as coincidence because coincidence is the only explanation that does not require escalation. Escalation is dangerous here in a way few outside the throne's shadow understand. To report voices or premonitions invites scrutiny not only from Mechanicus superiors, but from the custodian guard. The Custodes do not punish with cruelty. They punish with finality. If they decide a mind is compromised, that mind is removed from proximity to the throne permanently. Some are reassigned. Some are detained for evaluation. A few simply disappear into categories the Adeptus Mechanicus does not have clearance to access. The result is predictable. People learn to keep their experiences private. This silence, in turn, becomes another kind of pressure. An adept who begins to suspect the throne influences thought must endure that suspicion alone, because sharing it risks being marked. The mind turns inward. Patterns become more vivid without outside correction. Sleep becomes thinner, threaded with waking impressions that refuse to separate cleanly from dreams. The adept starts to wonder whether the problem is the throne, or the human mind trying too hard to make sense of something too vast to interpret. The ecclesiarchy has a different vocabulary for this. Some confessors speak of proximity to the emperor's radiance causing spiritual strain, as if the soul cannot endure being near the divine without cracking. These priests encourage penitence, additional prayer, fasting. The Mechanicus would call such remedies primitive, yet it cannot deny that they often help. An adept who fasts and prays may return to duty calmer, less prone to drifting thought. Whether this is faith or physiology is never resolved. The throne does not care what explanation is chosen, only that the work continues. Then there are the rare incidents that no one can fully dismiss. A maintenance team is working near a sealed junction when the corridor's vibration shifts suddenly, deepening into a pulse that feels almost like a heartbeat. Auspex readings remain stable. No alarms trigger. The pulse persists for 30 seconds, then fades. During that interval, every member of the team feels the same thing, the sensation of being observed, not watched visually, but held within attention, as if something immense has turned its focus briefly toward them. No one speaks until the pulse ends. Later, in a quiet alcove, they compare notes without meaning to. Each one describes the same pressure, the same fleeting certainty that the throne was not merely operating, but acknowledging. The next day, 2 of them are reassigned. No explanation is given. None is requested. That is how it happens. Not dramatic, not accusatory. Just a quiet alteration of duty rosters, as if Terra itself is ensuring certain minds do not remain too close for too long. Those left behind return to work with a new kind of caution. They stop lingering. They stop listening too closely. They become more efficient, not because they have grown more competent, but because they have learned the boundary of what they're allowed to notice. This is the deepest lesson the throne teaches without ever speaking. Knowledge is not forbidden only by doctrine. It is discouraged by consequence. And still, in the moments between tasks, when the corridors fall into their heavy, vibrating quiet, the adepts cannot help it. They listen. They feel. They wonder whether the voices in the machinery are the mind breaking under pressure, or the throne's ancient systems grinding against something sealed beneath them. Because the deeper you serve, the harder it becomes to believe the golden throne is merely resting on stone. It feels like it is resting on restraint. At a certain depth beneath the golden throne, maintenance stops being about preservation and becomes about avoidance. The corridors are still serviced, the system still monitored, but the language around them changes. Adepts stop referring to functions and begin referring to boundaries. Not physical ones alone, but conceptual ones. Lines that are not crossed, questions that are not completed aloud, schematics that end abruptly in blocks of redacted space. The throne's lowest strata are not unknown because they were forgotten. They are unknown because they were deliberately excised. Every institution involved has its own explanation, and none of them align cleanly. The Adeptus Mechanicus claims the deepest layers are legacy systems, remnants of archaic design whose internal logic predates standardized doctrine. The Ecclesiarchy speaks of sanctified containment, of holy depths sealed to preserve the emperor's purity from contamination by his own enemies. The Adeptus Custodes say nothing at all, which carries more weight than any official declaration ever could. The sealed zones are not dramatic. There are no warning glyphs carved in blood, no overt signs of danger. The doors are plain, their surfaces worn smooth by age rather than reinforced by ornamentation. Their locks are not keyed to codes or gene prints alone, but to conditions, pressure, thresholds, power harmonics. States of operation that must align perfectly before access is even theoretically possible. In practice, they never do. The doors remain closed because Terra itself is arranged to keep them that way. Those who serve long enough begin to notice patterns in what is sealed. The deepest chambers are not random. They form a lattice beneath the throne, distributed as if designed to support something under strain, rather than contain a single object. Power draw from these zones is constant but minimal, like a heartbeat at rest. Cooling systems route around them with unnecessary redundancy. Structural supports are densest directly above them, as if compensating for a weakness that cannot be allowed to propagate upward. No one assigned here is told what those chambers contain, but everyone is told why they must not be disturbed. Not explicitly. The message is conveyed through ritual behavior, through the way custodians stand closer to these doors than any other location, through the way alarms tied to these depths do not summon Mechanicus teams, but trigger silent alerts that bypass normal command hierarchies entirely, through the fact that every recorded attempt to alter or bypass these seals ends with the record itself being truncated. There are rumors, of course. Rumors are inevitable when silence becomes policy. Some claim the throne was built atop older structures, relics of forgotten human age whose technologies were too dangerous to dismantle. Others whisper failed solutions from the early days of the Imperium, attempts to solve problems that no longer exist in public memory, because acknowledging them would expose how close humanity came to annihilation. These stories are never consistent. They are not meant to be. Consistency would allow them to be tested. The most unsettling rumors come from those who frame the sealed depths not as storage, but as suppression, not something inert and forgotten, but something active that had to be buried rather than destroyed. They speak of systems designed to think, to respond, to adapt in ways that frighten even the Emperor's closest allies. According to these whispers, the Golden Throne is not only a throne, but a capstone. Its immense operation serving to drown out signals rising from below. No official source supports this. No official source denies it either. What can be observed, and therefore logged, is behavior. The way certain maintenance rites are performed more frequently near these depths, as a stability that requires constant reinforcement. The way failures in unrelated systems sometimes correlate with fluctuations in the sealed zone's power draw, though such correlations are always dismissed as coincidence. The way custodians occasionally alter patrol routes without explanation, lingering near specific access points for days at a time before resuming normal patterns. Faith attempt to fill the gap where knowledge is forbidden. Some priests describe the sealed depths as the Emperor's burden made manifest, the accumulated weight of sacrifices and decisions taken during humanity's darkest hours. Others insist they house nothing at all, that the danger lies not in what is contained, but in the temptation to believe secrets must always exist. Both interpretations are encouraged, because both discourage investigation. For the adepts who work here, the truth is less philosophical and more immediate. There are places beneath the throne where instruments behave strangely, where auspex readings flatten into meaningless consistency, as if sensing has been deliberately blinded, where proximity induces headaches, nausea, and a sense of pressure behind the eyes that fades only after retreat. These effects are attributed to ancient shielding, exotic materials, or simple psychosomatic response. Each explanation is plausible enough to prevent escalation, yet the throne itself reacts to these zones with unmistakable priority. Its most redundant systems cluster around them. Its most ancient litanies reference them obliquely, speaking of burdens borne below the seat of command, of evils bound not by chains but by continuation. The Emperor is praised not only for his vigilance, but for his endurance, language that suggests something ongoing rather than resolved. This is the most dangerous implication of all, that whatever lies beneath the Golden Throne is not a relic of the past, but a condition of the present, that the throne's immense demands are not solely for sustaining the Emperor's mortal form, but for maintaining a balance established at a moment humanity has chosen to forget. No one here says this aloud. The idea is too heavy, too destabilizing, but it lingers in the way people move more quickly through certain corridors, in the way they avoid pausing near sealed doors, in the way even veteran adepts feel relief when reassigned upward. The Golden Throne is worshipped as the anchor of the Imperium, but anchors are only necessary when something is trying to drift. And far beneath Terra's stone and sanctum, beneath machinery that never sleeps and guardians who never speak, something remains sealed not because it is dead, but because it must never be allowed to surface again. There are maintenance rites performed only once in a generation, passed down orally because committing them fully to data slates would create records that could be studied, questioned, and eventually misunderstood. These rites are conducted in corridors that do not appear on active maps, at junctions where the throne's vibration changes character, shifting from constant pressure to something closer to tension. The adepts assigned to these tasks are chosen carefully, not for brilliance, for obedience, for the ability to complete a procedure without attempting to contextualize it. The rites do not involve opening sealed doors. They involve reinforcing the conditions that keep those doors relevant. Power flows are adjusted minutely, not to increase output, but to maintain imbalance. Cooling systems are tuned not for efficiency, but for asymmetry. Certain harmonic stabilizers are kept deliberately out of phase with one another, creating interference patterns that cancel rather than amplify. To an outside observer, these configurations would appear wasteful, even flawed. Down here, they are survival. It is during these rites that the throne feels most present. Not louder, not more active, but more focused. The vibrations sharpen. The background hum resolves into a pattern that resists analysis, slipping out of measurable ranges whenever instrumentation is applied. Adept described the sensation as standing beside something straining against restraint, held in place not by chains, but by constant effort. The throne does not merely sit atop the sealed depths. It leans on them. On rare occasions, the rites fail, not catastrophically, not in ways that trigger evacuation or alarm. They fail subtly, through readings that refuse to stabilize, through harmonics that drift back into alignment no matter how carefully they are disrupted. When this happens, the response is immediate and decisive. Custodian guard appear without summons. Their presence felt before it is seen. They do not ask for reports. They observe, assess, and issue orders that override Mechanicus authority. Without explanation, entire sections are shut down. Powers rerouted through paths long considered obsolete. The throne's load increases temporarily, as if compensating for something that is pushed too hard from below. Afterward, no one speaks of the incident. The adepts involved are reassigned within days. Some are elevated, given less physically demanding roles closer to the surface. Others vanish from rosters entirely, their identifiers marked as transferred to duties beyond clearance. The distinction is never explained. What remains consistent is the message. Proximity to these depths is conditional, and that condition can be revoked without warning. Among the ecclesiarchy, there exist prayers that are never spoken publicly, invocations reserved for closed sanctums where even confession is unnecessary because no forgiveness is being sought. These prayers do not ask for protection or guidance. They ask for continuation, for the burden beneath the throne to remain borne, for whatever was sealed to remain bound by effort rather than absolution. The language is careful, avoiding names, avoiding description. It frames the emperor's sacrifice not as a single act, but as an ongoing state. This framing matters. It suggests that the Golden Throne's purpose is not solely to sustain life, but to maintain an equilibrium that cannot be allowed to resolve. The throne is not a solution. It is a postponement, a decision made long ago to hold something in place indefinitely rather than confront the consequences of releasing or destroying it. There are fragments in forbidden archives that hint at earlier attempts, projects whose designations have been stripped from official history, referenced only through negative space where records should exist, mentions of alternatives considered and rejected, of outcomes deemed unacceptable not because they failed, but because they succeeded in ways that threatened humanity's conception of itself. These fragments are never complete enough to reconstruct a narrative. That is by design. A narrative invites debate. Debate invites repetition. What can be inferred is more disturbing than any explicit revelation. That beneath the Golden Throne lies not a singular horror, but the residue of choice. Systems built to contain consequences humanity could not afford to face. Mechanisms that exist to prevent a return to a state of possibility that once nearly destroyed everything. The throne's endless hunger for power, its constant demand for maintenance and sacrifice, is not wasteful. It is intentional. It keeps something else starved. Those who sense this do not articulate it. Articulation would change the relationship between knowledge and responsibility. Instead, they carry it as unease, as an instinctive reluctance to linger, as a pressure that eases only when they ascend toward levels where myth replaces machinery. The deeper truth remains below, not because it is unknown, but because it is unbearable. The Golden Throne is celebrated as humanity's greatest achievement. Down here, it feels more like humanity's greatest restraint. And restraints, no matter how strong, are only meaningful while the force they contain continues to press against them. From the surface of Terra, the Golden Throne is presented as inevitability. Pilgrims speak of it as if it has always existed, as if the Emperor has always been seated there, immobile and eternal, holding back the darkness through will alone. The story is comforting because it removes responsibility. If the throne is fate, then no one living can be blamed for what it demands. Down in the depths, among those who feel its weight in their bones, that illusion does not survive. Here, the throne is understood as maintenance, not destiny. Every hour it continues to function is a result of deliberate action, of choices repeated endlessly, because the alternative has been judged unacceptable. The Imperium does not merely inherit the throne. It agrees with it, again and again, through labor, sacrifice, and silence. This agreement is never signed. It is enacted. The people who keep the throne alive rarely frame their work as heroism. Heroism implies an endpoint, a moment when effort resolves into victory. The throne offers no such closure. Its systems do not improve. They decay at a controlled rate, stabilized only through increasingly complex intervention. Each generation of adepts inherits a structure marginally more fragile than the one before, propped up by layers of ritual and workaround that will horrify the original architects, if any of them still live to be horrified. This slow degradation is not accidental. It is the consequence of design that was never meant to be elegant or enduring. The throne was built to solve an immediate problem under catastrophic pressure. It was then expanded, reinforced, and sanctified until dismantling it became more dangerous than sustaining it. At some point, the choice ceased to be between solutions and became a choice between continuations. Keep the throne running or face whatever was sealed beneath it without preparation. Those closest to its operation feel this as moral weight rather than technical burden. They know, even if they never articulate it, that the throne consumes resources far beyond what it produces in visible benefit. Psychers are fed into its processes in numbers that are never publicized. Power grids are diverted. Entire sectors exist primarily to support its demands. These are not temporary measures. They are structural features of the Imperium now, baked into its economy and theology. The Astronomican's light still burns, carried by choirs who never see the world's a guide. The golden throne still sustains the Emperor's body, or so doctrine insists. But beneath those acknowledged functions lies the quieter truth that the throne also sustains ignorance. It keeps buried what must not be revisited. It allows humanity to believe that its darkest experiments are behind it rather than beneath its feet. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when this understanding threatens to surface. A system's failure that cascades too close to sealed depths. A harmonic anomaly that resists correction. A custodian standing watch longer than usual at a junction no one is meant to notice. In those moments, the illusion of inevitability cracks, and the throne is revealed for what it truly is, an ongoing decision to endure rather than resolve. The Adeptus Custodes embody this decision more fully than any other institution. Their vigil is not symbolic. It is practical. They do not protect the throne because it is holy. They protect it because they know what it is restraining. Their silence is not reverence. It is discipline. To speak of what lies beneath would be to invite the possibility of debate. And debate is the enemy of containment. For the Imperium at large, the throne's cost is abstract. Pilgrims feel awe, not pressure. Citizens pray for protection without understanding the mechanics of that protection. Faith works precisely because it simplifies. Down here, simplicity is a luxury no one can afford. Every system, every rite, every reassignment is weighed against a single question that is never spoken aloud. Can humanity afford to stop? The answer, so far, has always been no. So the throne endures, not as a monument to triumph, but as a testament to fear refined into policy. Fear of the warp, fear of failure, fear of remembering what humanity once tried to do in its desperation to survive. The Imperium chooses a known suffering of maintenance over the unknown consequences of revelation, and in doing so, binds itself tighter to the very structure that defines it. The Golden Throne does not demand worship. It demands agreement. And every day it continues to function, that agreement is renewed quietly and without ceremony by people who understand that whatever lies beneath it is not gone. It is waiting. Waiting is the most honest state the Imperium ever admits to. It does not conquer the future beneath the Golden Throne. It postpones it. The throne hums, draws power, consumes lives, and in doing so keeps the present locked in place just long enough for humanity to endure another generation. That endurance is mistaken for victory by those far above the foundations, by those who only see the Astronomican's light, and not the machinery that keeps it from flickering. Down here, victory has never been a word. Those who maintain the throne understand that nothing beneath it is static. Even sealed, even suppressed, whatever was buried continues to press, to test the limits of restraint. Systems require more frequent recalibration. Power fluctuations grow harder to smooth out. Litanies that once stabilized harmonics must be extended, amended, repeated with greater precision. The throne is not failing in any dramatic sense. It is aging under strain, and strain is cumulative. There are whispers, always framed as theological reflection rather than speculation, that the Emperor himself bears the greatest cost of this arrangement, that his continued existence upon the throne is not merely life-sustained, but will expend it endlessly to keep the balance from tipping. These are not claims made with certainty. They are prayers shaped like questions, offered in private by those who feel the pressure most keenly. If the Emperor suffers, it is not as punishment, but as function. He is the final reinforcement in a structure designed to never rest. This possibility is never addressed officially. The Imperium cannot afford to imagine the throne as anything other than sacred necessity. To see it as a compromise would be to admit that humanity's survival rests on something unresolved, something postponed rather than defeated. And yet, every choice made beneath the palace reinforces that truth. No one plans for an end to the throne. They plan only for its continuation. Even the Adeptus Custodes, in their perfect discipline, operate with this understanding. Their watch is eternal because the threat is eternal, not invading armies, not Xeno's empires, but the consequences of knowledge humanity chose to bury rather than erase. The custodians do not guard against an external assault from below. They guard against the moment someone decides the seals are no longer necessary, because that moment would not come from malice. It would come from hope. Hope that humanity has grown strong enough to face what it once feared. Hope that understanding could replace restraint. Hope that the past could be confronted without repeating it. These hopes are more dangerous than heresy because they feel reasonable. They feel earned, and they would tear open foundations that have been bearing weight for 10,000 years. The Golden Throne exists to deny that hope. It enforces a universe where survival is purchased through limitation, where ignorance is not weakness but armor, where progress is carefully rationed so it never circles back to forbidden possibility. The Imperium does not ask whether this is just. It asks whether it is necessary. So far, the answer has always been the same. Yes, and so the throne remains vast and unyielding, its machinery grinding away beneath prayers and banners, beneath myth and doctrine, beneath a civilization that has forgotten how close it once came to destroying itself through ambition alone. Whatever lies beneath it remains unseen, unnamed, and unchallenged, not because it's been defeated, but because humanity lacks the courage to risk remembering it fully. The most unsettling truth is not that something terrible lies beneath the Golden Throne. It is that the Imperium knows this and chooses every day to keep it there. Not forever, just for one more day, and then another, and another, as long as the throne holds, as long as Terra bears the weight, as long as humanity agrees that some answers are more dangerous than extinction. That is what lies beneath the Golden Throne. Not a monster waiting to rise, but a choice that must never be undone.